Welcome to this session of the Digital Research of Alliance of Canada, October Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This is one of the events, and today's session is about insider threats. I'm Jessica Gallo, Sensitive Research Security Analyst from the UBC Advanced Research Computing, and I'm going to be the facilitator for today's session. As we proceed with the session today, we do acknowledge the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations and communities who have been harmed by colonial and unethical research. Furthermore, we also acknowledge the data sovereignty and research priorities of these nations and communities. So on behalf of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, we commit to understanding and taking up our role in reducing harm and advancing reconciliation in research. Some code of conduct reminders. The Alliance seeks to provide a welcoming, engaging, and safe community for everyone. And so discriminatory language is not appropriate in any venue or platform. The Alliance does not tolerate harassment in any form, and we understand harassment as any behavior that threatens another person or group or produces an unsafe environment. So with that, your presenters for today, for today's session, are Benjamin Reed and Catherine Divida. So Ben has extensive experience in information technology, having held various roles in cybersecurity, systems, networking, project management, and programming across private, public, and nonprofit sectors. He holds a Master's of Business Administration, specializing in management of technology, and a Bachelor of Computer Information Systems. Additionally, he is a certified information systems security professional and a project management professional. And Catherine is a training coordinator for the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and she supports research data management, advanced research computing, research software, and cybersecurity teams in the development and implementation of nationally coordinated training and awareness programs such as this, and initiatives across Canada. She also provides support to the National Training Expert Group. Prior to joining the Alliance, Catherine worked as a high school teacher, where she pioneered innovative learning experiences, contributed to the implementation of organizational policies, revamped curriculum structures, and initiated a successful onboarding and mentorship program for new teachers. Catherine studied education and has a master's degree in educational leadership from McGill University, as well as a certification in design thinking from various institutions, including IBM. And Kat and Ben have a fun and interactive session for you guys today. So with that said, I present to you Ben and Kat.
Thank you so much, Jess. We welcome you here today, and we look forward to the session this next hour or so that we're going to be sharing together. So we appreciate you carving the time out of your calendars to be here with us today to advance your understanding and your practice of cybersecurity, particular to insider threats. Just a disclaimer before we start that within this presentation, there is the use of AI-generated content. And note that this is an interactive presentation. So we want to make sure that you're not only following along, but that you're involved in this as an active and engaging learning experience. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. If we have brushed over something that has piqued your interest and you'd like to discuss more, please hop in the chat, tell us what you're thinking, or please use the Q&A feature if you have some questions you'd like to ask. There'll also be a little quiz at the end So please be prepared. We want to see how much you're able to kind of retain through this and see how much this has helped improve your understanding of insider threats. So with that, Ben, I pass it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. And so this presentation really aligns with October Cybersecurity Awareness Month's theme, which is cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. We want to take that idea one step further. Just like a sports team, every member plays an important role. If you're not working together, the whole organization can be at risk. And it's not just about individual efforts. On the sort of topic of sports, remember the LA Kings never won a Stanley Cup when they had Wayne Gretzky. Um, it's about the team moving forward and protecting against threats. So before we get started, I just want to kind of run a quick poll to sort of better understand the audience. And so we're going to use the Zoom feature here and throw a quick poll up. And so where do you sit at from a cybersecurity perspective? Do you sit more at the sort of beginner line? Do you consider yourself more an intermediate? Are you more on the advanced line, or are you sort of more on the expert line? Actually, you should probably be leading this presentation then. And so, yeah, we'll throw up a poll here in just a moment. It sort of gives us an opportunity to sort of better gauge our audience here. And so,
Sorry, no poll
no
yet.
poll. Okay, no poll yet.
No
Okay,
poll yet. So just throw your thoughts in the chat, please.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kat. Yeah, throw your thoughts in the chat there, and at least we'll get a little bit of a gauge there. Okay, so we got a couple beginners, we got some intermediates. Nobody wants to call themselves out as an expert. Okay. No problem. No problem. Okay. Appreciate that. And so I'll make sure we tailor the conversation and sort of the focus around sort of those levels. And so I know the topic is called insider threat. So full transparency, I'm not a spy. I'm not a spy hunter. I don't work for a secretive government organization. So that's not necessarily what this presentation is about. Though I can't necessarily speak for Kat. So Kat, do you work for a secret government organization or agency by chance?
Well, if I did, I would have to, yeah, just kidding. Just your neighborhood friendly training expert here.
Yeah, and so our focus here really is going to be around sort of the relations around the research community. And so this session is really going to try to relate back to sort of what's relevant for us. Insider threat in general is a growing concern in today's digital landscape. And our goal is to shed a little bit more light on here and for everyone to get a better understanding of, why it's important, what it is, who the actors are, what impact it has, how we detect it, and how we deal with it, and ultimately how we prevent it in the future. And so typically, insider threats are often overlooked, especially in research environments where the focus tends to be on external attacks and safeguarding technology. So you might be wondering, why am I here? And why is insider threat relevant to the research community? The answer lies in the unique risks that insider pose inside a research environment. Universities and research institutions handle valuable data. Whether that's sensitive data or intellectual property, these innovations have the potential for changing our world. Insiders, people like yourselves, have legitimate access to this information. The human element in cybersecurity is often regarded as the weakest link. And so sort of a throwback to a 2010 British TV show by Anna Robertson, where she says, "You are the weakest link," in a very sort of like stereotypical British style. And so, with that in mind, no matter how advanced your security technologies are, they rely on people to use them properly. A single mistake by an insider can bypass even the most sophisticated defense. And that's why it's critical for everyone in the research community to understand their role in maintaining security and to be aware of the impacts they have. All the way from the grad student doing a bunch of the work, all the way up to a VP of research. Just so we have a sort of common understanding of what we're talking about here, let's define insider threat. According to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Insider threat is defined as the potential for an individual with authorized access to use that access to cause harm to the security of an organization. This harm can be caused either intentionally or unintentionally and can affect the organization's operations, assets, or the nation itself. Examples of insider threat include espionage, terrorism, and unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, or degradation of organizational resources. Also, along that definition line, insider threats can be further categorized into two main groups: malicious insiders, such as an actor on the left who intentionally means to cause harm. These individuals may steal sensitive data, sabotage systems, or leak confidential information. On the other side, on the right, the accidental insiders are employees or contractors who unintentionally cause damage. They may fall victim to a phishing attack, unknowingly shared sensitive information, or made security mistakes simply because they're unaware of the best practices or cybersecurity hygiene, such as the items listed in Scott Baker's earlier presentation during October Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Let's dive a little bit deeper into insider threats, as they are ultimately tied to human behavior. Driven by a range of emotions such as dissatisfaction, personal gain, or carelessness, sometimes individuals within an organization are manipulated or influenced by external pressures, represented by the hands pulling a string in the image, which symbolizes how their decisions can be influenced both with and without their awareness. From the psychological perspective, human brain is complex, and insider threats often tap into vulnerabilities. This could include emotions such as frustration, anger, or fear. These emotions can override logic, leading individuals to act in ways they wouldn't normally. Cognitive biases also plays a role. Many people rationalize harmful action by downplaying their consequences or justifying their behavior. The brain's decision-making process, especially under stress, can be manipulated, leading to insider threats. So I guess what I'm really seeing here is, at its core, insider threats are not purely about technology, but psychology and human motivation. And so understanding sort of the human condition and emotion and cognitive drivers can help us identify and prevent potential threats before they escalate. When it comes to insider threats, the potential consequences can be significant and far-reaching, especially in a research environment. One of the most immediate risks is data breach and intellectual property theft. Insider threats, whether intentional or accidental, can lead to sensitive data being exposed or stolen. This might include unpublished research findings, confidential patent data, or trade secrets that an organization has worked hard to develop. Once the data is compromised, it can be used by competitors, sold on the black market, or leaked to the public, undermining the organization's ability to stay competitive or maintain credibility. The financial impact can also be devastating. Financial or reputation damage also inevitably has a significant insider threat. The organization can face hefty fines, legal fees, and the costs associated with cleaning up breach or restoring data. Additionally, organizations' reputation can take a severe hit. If stakeholders, partners, and the public lose confidence in the organization's ability to safeguard sensitive information, future funding, partnerships, or collaborative opportunities may be put at risk. It's interesting, a pretty significant and a pretty profound effect of insider threat is potentially the loss of trust within the research community. Research often relies on collaboration, and the trust is a key component of this process. When an insider compromises data or disrupts the integrity of a research project, it can harm relationships with other researchers, institutions, or even the public participating in studies. Once the trust is broken, it can be incredibly difficult to rebuild, potentially isolating the organization from future collaboration opportunities and hindering scientific process. Another major concern in the research field is sharing of sensitive data, such as unpublished research finding or patients' data in clinical trials. Before research is officially published, the findings are often shared internally with trusted collaborators. This early stage data is valuable but vulnerable to insider threat. For instance, if an insider findings is shared with a competitor or makes them public prematurely, it could undermine the organization's competitive edge or prevent research from receiving proper credit for their work. Similarly, clinical trials involve vast amounts of patient data, which is highly sensitive and protected by privacy laws. An insider who improperly handles or shares data could expose patients' private information, leading to legal consequences or damaging the organization's reputation. Insider threats in these areas can disrupt research process, compromise data integrity, and lead to serious ethical or legal issues. And so that was sort of a fair amount to digest. So I guess what I'm going to try to do here is to sort of provide some real world examples of how insider threats have sort of happened in the world more broadly. And so if you go back to 2013, does anybody remember Edward Snowden? And so this is a really good example of insider threat. A former contractor with the National Security Agency leaked classified information to the media, exposing the extent of government surveillance programs in the United States. His revelations about mass data collection led to widespread public debate on privacy and government surveillance practices, which ultimately damaged public trust in government institutions. The Snowden leaks highlighted even a single insider with access to sensitive data can cause a massive breach affecting national security. Back in 2018, a disgruntled employee in Tesla used a fake username to modify critical production systems and leak confidential data. His actions were motivated by revenge when he was denied a promotion. Breach not only delayed production within Tesla, but it also caused the Tesla stock price to drop by around 5%, sort of demonstrating that there's also financial and operational damages that insider threat can cause. If we go back to 2019 in more of a Canadian example, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, two scientists, Dr. Zhengong Wow and her husband, Kindun Chow, apologize for the brutal pronunciation, were removed from Canada's only level 4 laboratory, a lab handling the most dangerous infectious diseases in the country. The pair were under investigation for violating protocols related to transferring samples to China. The incident raises concerns about potential espionage and the misuse of sensitive biological research. And the last example I have is from Charles LeBreur, the chair of Harvard University's chemistry department and a leading nanotechnology specialist, was arrested for concealing his participation in China's Thousand Talents program. LeBreur received millions of dollars in research grants from the United States, and he was secretly sharing his research findings with China in exchange for financial compensation. This case kind of underscores how insider threats can lead to the sort of putting sensitive data in jeopardy and sort of undermining national security within sort of the environment. I'll pause here for a moment. Does anybody have any relevant or topical particular instance of insider threats they want to maybe throw in the chat? Maybe we can follow up with as well. And if not, we can move on too. So if you have any that are particularly relevant at this moment, feel free to share them. Give folks a couple minutes.
Yeah, Ben, I think this might also be a good time to pause and see if anyone has any questions or things that were particularly interesting to them. If you'd like to raise your hand to share, or again, you can put that in the chat.
I can share something with you if you like.
Yeah.
That should be up to, that's why I'm looking at topic. There was an example a couple of years ago in Quebec where a disgruntled employee in a financial institution did send some information for personal gain, which caused a little bit of havoc.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. Thank you for sharing, Lynn. Employees are put in a place of trust, and and we're all motivated by specific factors, and definitely there's also another one. Fraser made a comment. The Edward Snowden example is of an insider threat who made the world better, not worse. Yeah, and I guess that one, a great comment, Fraser, and I think that one comes back to the example where who the perspective of the insider threat comes from. From the world's perspective, absolutely more transparency and around data, how it's collected. I think it made the world a better place. I think from the intelligence community inside the United States, it definitely didn't make the world better for them. And so that was a particular perspective one, but yeah, I appreciate that, Fraser. And it looks like Darcy also mentioned a Ferrari employee photocopying info and trying to sell it. Yeah, no, that's interesting as well. And so, yeah, there's definitely opportunity for financial gain for employees that sort of participate in those kind of activities, and appreciate the examples. Thank you. And so, what can we do about insider threats, and how can we identify these individuals before the damage is done? One approach is to pay attention to behavioral signs. Insider threats often exhibit unusual behavior that can serve as an early warning sign. For example, an employee may be accessing information that they typically wouldn't need for their role. If someone is suddenly interested in data that falls outside of their job responsibilities, this could be a red flag. Another sign might be an individual downloading large amounts of data in a short period, especially if the data is sensitive or unrelated to their work. This behavior could also indicate someone is preparing to misuse or improperly share information. The key is to understanding what normal behavior looks like for each role, and that noting any deviation and following up with an investigation. Other behavioral signs to watch out for include employees working odd or unusual hours without a clear reason. This could indicate they're trying to carry out activities when nobody else is around to monitor them. Additionally, changes in how employees talk or interact with the organization can also be revealing. For instance, if someone was once a positive and engaged starts expressing negative views, posting critical comments about the organization, or distancing themselves from team activities, these behavioral shift could be a sign of brain discontent or a malicious intent. Sudden changes in an employee's economic status, such as making large purchases or experiencing financial difficulties, could also suggest a motivation for this behavior. As well, they may be more vulnerable to engage in insider threat activities for financial gain. Beyond behavioral signs, there are technical indicators of potential insider threat. For example, similar to above, accessing company systems from unusual locations or using unfamiliar devices could be a warning sign. Imagine somebody logging into a system from a country they don't usually travel to, or using a personal device that isn't registered with the organization's IT systems. These actions might indicate the attempt to hide their activities or avoid detection. By monitoring these technical anomalies, organizations can quickly flag potential risk and respond accordingly. One of the biggest challenges is detecting insider threats, is distinguishing between normal everyday behavior and actions that could be harmful. Employees often have legitimate reasons for accessing sensitive information or performing tasks that might raise concerns, making it difficult to tell when something is genuinely suspicious. For example, an employee downloading a large amount of data could simply be them doing their job, but in other cases might signal malicious intent. Harmful behavior can often be very similar to normal activities, which makes it tricky to spot the real threat without making assumptions or jumping to the conclusion. This challenge is even more complicated because insiders are familiar with the systems they use. They know how to blend their actions with regular work tasks, making their behavior harder to detect. Organizations need to carefully analyze patterns and look for subtle signs of misuse while allowing employees the freedom to do their jobs without unnecessarily restrictions. Striking the balance between security and productivity is an ongoing struggle when trying to detect insider threats effectively. Another significant hurdle is the social resistance employees maybe have to reporting suspicious behavior. There's a normal reluctance to rat out a coworker, especially if the individual is well-liked or trusted. Many people feel uncomfortable with the idea of turning someone in they know, even if they suspect them of something might be wrong. This hesitation can stem from not wanting to create tension in the workplace or feeling unsure about whether the behavior they observe is actually a threat. It's important to acknowledge that people often want to avoid disrupting their social relationships at work, even when they know they should be reporting something. Another challenge is detecting insider threat in the shift to remote work. With employees working from home and other locations outside the office, traditional security measures may no longer be enough. In a remote environment, it's harder to monitor the same way you would in an office setting. For example, employees are now using personal devices, home networks, and cloud-based applications. which can make tracking and tracing insider threat more difficult. Organizations need to rethink their approach to security in this new reality. It's important to adapt security strategies to better fit remote and hybrid working models. This includes improving visibility on how employees access and handle sensitive data, regardless of where they're working from. One of the most important steps in mitigating insider threat is to establishing strong cybersecurity policies. While most organizations have these, it's important that these policies are understood and provide clear guidelines to employees and staff on how to handle data and access company resources. They also outline consequences for violating security protocols, which help create a security-conscious culture, and a well-structured policy ensure that everyone understands their responsibilities and are able to follow best practices to protect the organization from internal risk. Another key prevention measure is conducting training and awareness programs for all staff. Similar to October Cybersecurity Awareness Month, cybersecurity threats are constantly evolving, and employees need to stay up to date with the latest tactics that attackers could use. These training sessions help employees recognize signs of insider threat, such as unusual behavior or data access patterns. It also teaches them to respond accordingly. Training also promotes proactive approach, where employees feel empowered to report specific activities before they lead to harm. And it goes back to sort of the old saying, many eyes are always better than a few. And so it provides definitely more visibility as well. Additionally, conducting regular assessments and checking your security systems to see how well they're working and to find any weaknesses or gaps, and bringing in outside cybersecurity experts to test your defenses and simulate real life scenarios as they sort of work through your organizations. Borrowing on the recommendations from an earlier presentation on the research risk assessment workshop led by Luke and Jessica this month, using access controls is important in reducing risks for insider threats. By using these systems that control who control access to what information, organizations can limit unnecessary access to sensitive data. This approach often combined with the principle of least privilege, which means employees are only granted the access, the sort of minimal access to information they need to perform their job duties. This way, it makes it even harder for an insider to misuse their access because it's very limited. Additionally, regular monitor of network activity and logging can help determine and deter potential insiders and detect them earlier. Continuous observing of how employees interact with the system allows you to spot abnormality patterns and potentially for insider threats. These new processes, tools, and technology can help detect unusual behavior, but it's also critical to train employees to recognize and avoid these risky actions. Managing insider risks require a mixture of updated technology, strong security practice, and a focus on human behavior, especially in a flexible work environment where the old ways of monitoring may not apply. And so lastly, another important step is fostering and creating an environment where employees feel comfortable reporting behavior is essential in mitigating insider threat. When a staff and users feel like they can share their concerns without the fear of retaliation, they're more likely to come forward with potentially valuable information. Open communication helps build trust between staff and management, fostering an atmosphere where security becomes everyone's responsibility. Employees should feel empowered to report any unusual actions or suspicious behavior they notice, knowing that will be taken seriously and handled with care. To encourage openness, we can investigate and implement anonymous reporting tools that establish clear, supportive procedures for sharing concerns. Regularly remind employees that their input is vital to maintaining the security of the workplace and also strengthening the culture of security within the organization. And sort of really driving home this point, if you see something, say something, to ensure that potential issues are addressed before they escalate. Building a security-minded culture goes beyond simply following the rules. It's about making security a core part of everyday work life. Everyone plays a role in promoting security awareness and leading by setting an example. As employees are more likely to adopt similar attitudes, this creates a ripple effect through the organization, such as the Alliance, encouraging everyone to take security seriously. And so if you're interested in learning more, there's a really interesting website on Canadian Insider Risk Management Center out of Carleton University. So I encourage folks to check out if they're interested in more information. But we're gonna hand it off to Kat for more of the sort of interactive question part to sort of see if you retained some of the items from earlier. And so I'll hand it off to you, Kat.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you for that. So we're going to put your knowledge to the test here. Don't worry, this is not a quiz. The data from these polls is not being collected and is not being used for any purpose other than for your own self-reflection and like introspection on what you currently know or what you may have gained in terms of knowledge on the concept of and the mitigation of the insider threats throughout this presentation. So I'll ask you to read each simulation or each situation. We will go over it together. You will then look at the different options, analyze, see which is best in accordance with cybersecurity best practices. And then I will launch a Zoom poll for you to lock in what you think is the best answer. The only other thing I'll ask you to do is to track your score so you can see at the end kind of where you stand on the spectrum of, cybersecurity awareness. So next slide, please, Ben. Okay, so this first situation is about mishandling research data. So a graduate student is preparing a data set for publication, and the student needs to transfer it to a cloud storage service to share it with a co-author at another institution. So the dilemma here is that the student considers using their personal cloud storage account to upload the data set as it seems convenient, and they've done this before with non-research files. So what should they do? They can go ahead and use their personal cloud storage. Why not? It's quick and easy. They can email the data set directly to the co-author as an attachment. They can contact their IT department for the approval and the verification of which cloud services are authorized. Or they can just wait until the research is published and then share the data set when it's available publicly. So is this the student's personal data? This is a data set. This is data that they've collected for a research project. So it could include sensitive data. It may not include sensitive data, but it definitely includes data that is not just their own. So I see here that the majority of respondents selected option C. So to contact their IT department for approval to find out which cloud service would be best in use. There's also some who have opted for waiting until the research is published. So I'd love to hear from anyone who answered the poll and who put either C or D, if you would like to share your reasoning behind that. If you don't want to necessarily speak out loud, you can throw it in the chat.
I can.
Sure.
Yeah, I put C only because some of the data wasn't there. And I didn't really know what the risk level of the data was. So they probably should contact someone. If it's 100% their data, they can kind of do what they want. But yeah, I put C because not all the data is theirs.
Right. Great point. And I think that indicates a pretty solid practice in cybersecurity that is, when in doubt, opt for the most cautious route. So in this case, if you don't know, the best option is indeed to contact your IT department for approval. Option D is also a relatively sound option cybersecurity wise. The only issue is, and again, it's not specified here, so it is a good answer, although not the correct answer, because you don't know how quickly your co-author may need to access this data. So waiting until the research is published can be quite a lengthy process, and that co-author may need access to that data set beforehand. So although both C and D are both sound options from a cybersecurity point of view, option C was the correct answer here.
I'll just add the item from chat to Jocelyn mentioned the IT department may not know because it's research data. And like, I guess the follow-up question to that is, if that is the initial point of contact, you'd hope the IT department could forward you to the correct group that could give you an answer for that. And so the idea there is whether IT gives you the final answer or not, at least they'll hopefully point you in the right direction there.
I think, sorry, Ben, to interrupt. I think
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
student that has the data that isn't theirs that they're using, part of having that data is they need to know the requirements for how they can use that data. And part of that would be sharing. If they don't know that, then it's concerning and they shouldn't have the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be
Yeah.
part of the data management plan. So
And
I'll
I
end this
guess
poll.
too-
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Kat. And I
Yeah, no,
guess
go.
too, for the contacting of the IT people, and like Ben said, contacting the IT people who may actually direct you to the appropriate people who can say whether or not the cloud service is verified. I think this one kind of leads to the they can connect you to individuals who can review the cloud service platform to see whether or not or how they handle the data and whether or not they store it securely, or how that's stored, how it's shared, where they share it, where they keep it. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
just thought
thanks
I'd
for
add
that.
that.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so this next situation is about phishing awareness. So a researcher receives an email that appears to be from their university's IT department. So they verified the email, it looks to be legit. And in this email, they're prompted to log in to verify their credentials for an upcoming system update. So the dilemma is the email contains a link that is supposed to redirect you to a login page. And although the researcher has never received such a request from IT before, they have recently had to verify their accounts on several other tools. So in this case, what should the researcher do? They can click the link, log in to verify their credentials as requested. After all, the email did appear to be legit. They can forward the email to their IT department to verify its legitimacy. They can reply to the email asking for more information before logging in, or they can simply delete the email without doing anything and say, this is not my problem. If someone really needs something, they'll come back to me again. In this case, the majority of you have opted for B, which is to forward the email to the IT department to verify if it's legitimate. Whenever there's a link in an email, especially from your IT department, it is best practice to avoid including links in this type of email. So if you're being asked to verify something, there'll be usually a more formal communication, or you wouldn't be asked to do so through a simple email. So forwarding it to your IT department or reporting it as phishing would be the best thing to do. I see some people have also opted for D, which is just to delete the email. Although this avoids any sort of threat on your behalf, it doesn't flag this as a threat to the organization. And so there's nothing really stopping someone else from accidentally clicking on the link. So if you do report this, then there will immediately be some sort of an investigation to see how many accounts have been affected, and with follow-up communications to not click on that link. So does forwarding the email to IT pose a threat? So I don't believe so, because I think in most of these cases, the threat really lies in interacting with that link that's in the email. Opening the email itself doesn't necessarily pose the same level of threat, but Ben, you might be in a better position to answer this.
Yeah, and so this really depends on how your email system is set up. A lot of the time, inbound messages are scanned for if there's any attachments for viruses. A lot of the time, the links in emails aren't necessarily fully scanned all the way through. And so typically forwarding email to either security or IT or support, and you flag it like, this seems suspicious, is this? There isn't usually a lot of that's standard practice. If Also, you have if you're running Outlook, you have an option to report in the Outlook client to report it. That's the equivalent of forwarding it too. And so that'll also just tag the email as suspicious, and then the IT folks can take a look at it as well. And so, but yeah, no, that's perfectly reasonable action to take.
Great, thanks so much. And great point, Linda. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, just a quick reminder, make sure you're tallying your points. So simulation 3, so an RDM specialist working with a national data repository is on vacation. So a colleague who urgently needs access to a data set that the specialist is responsible for, asks for their login credentials to retrieve the data. Timely access to this data is crucial for a research project's success. It cannot wait a week until the specialist returns from their vacation. So in this case, what should the RDM specialist do? So should they share the credentials temporarily and then change the password upon their return? Should they share the credentials, but then notify their IT department afterwards? Should they ask their colleague to wait until they return? Or should they direct the colleague to request through official channels? All right, so we've got quite a few respondents, and unanimously, you've all answered D here. So the best thing to do would be to direct the colleague to request access through official channels. So in this case, yeah, exactly. If you're on vacation, ignore the message. It's not your concern, it's someone else's. So it's really not worth it to share your credentials. You don't know if the streams in which you're going to use to share them are secure. Sometimes changing your password after is just simply not enough. So the best thing to do in this case is just to resort to those official channels that are in place for this purpose specifically. Okay, so this one is handling a suspicious external request. So a researcher is contacted by someone claiming to be from a funding agency. So this person is, so the person who is reaching out to the researcher requests access to the researcher's unpublished data to evaluate for a potential grant opportunity. So they're saying, let me see your data. I think there's an opportunity for us to, issue some sort of a research grant here. This could be really great for your project. The dilemma: the researcher has never heard from this individual, but is familiar with the agency and is excited about the opportunity for funding. What should the researcher do? So they can share the data, since it could lead to potential funding, contact the funding agency directly to verify if this request is legit. They can ignore the request entirely, or request more information from the individual and then decide based on their response. So in this case, what should the researcher do? All right, once again, unanimously, you've all answered B. You're all cybersecurity experts at this point, so great job. So in this case, yes, you should contact the funding agency directly if you think that the email is a potential threat. The best thing to do is just not to interact with that email. Don't reply. Simply contact the funding agency. And then if you think that your account has been compromised and that's how you've received this email, then you should also follow up with your IT department. Oh, we have another question in the chat here. A comment, sorry, Darcy. They should also make sure they get the contact information from a reputable source, not through information provided to them from the person contacting them initially. Exactly. So great advice. Thanks, Darcy. Okay, so this is a potential malicious threat, excuse me. So a PhD student notices that a fellow researcher has been working strange hours and has been making disgruntled remarks about their lab. Eventually, the researcher invites the student to join a new high-profile project. The project is described as being groundbreaking, but when the student asks for details, the researcher is vague, giving the non-committal answers and dodging specific questions. So again, pay attention to the changes in behavior here. So the dilemma is, despite the lack of clarity, the student's curiosity is piqued, and they begin working late into the night, accessing large amounts of data beyond the scope of their current research. The student claims that these data sets are needed for the new project, but they haven't officially informed their supervisor or provided any formal documentation about the project. So what should the student do? Should they agree to join, but only as an undercover operative to collect evidence? Should they confront the researcher directly and demand more clarity on the new project and then to decide afterwards? Should they agree to join the project, because this could be an incredible opportunity to jumpstart their career, or should they report the suspicious behavior to the supervisor? In this case, the appropriate answer is D. Although it might be enticing to, approach this new exciting project, all of the indicators are there for this to be something quite suspicious. And so considering all that we know for this situation, the best thing to do is simply to go to the supervisor and then allow the supervisor to take it from there. So in this situation, a system admin is going into a secure data center that requires keycard access. As they swipe their card to enter, a maintenance worker approaches, asking to be let in. So the worker is carrying a clipboard, they're wearing an official looking vest, claiming they're there to service equipment and are in a hurry. However, they don't have their key card on hand. The worker tries to follow the administrator into the secure area before the door closes. So in this case, what should the administrator do? So in this case, the correct answer would be B, to politely refuse and to ask them to contact the building security or to contact their supervisor. I think one thing to keep in mind here is that, kind of like being an active bystander, you never want to put yourself in like harm's way physically. And so if this maintenance worker were to become aggressive or violent, like, you would want to remove yourself from that situation. So it's always about reducing threat, reducing harm, doing the best that you can do without putting yourself in harm's way. I asked you to tally your score at the start. So if you got 5 to 6 points, congratulations, you're a cybersecurity superstar. In the next year, we will expect you to host this session along with us. If you got between 3 and 4 points, you're on the right track. You've got the basics. Don't worry, cybersecurity is tricky. And if you got 0 to 2 points, looks like you're definitely the threat. So this should be a good place to start in terms of building your cybersecurity awareness. And again, remember, this is not easy stuff. Human psychology is hard, and a lot of these social engineering attacks play very much on our human vulnerabilities. So I think that's it, right, Ben?
Yeah, that's it. I think, yeah. Any questions from the audience for Kat or myself? Yeah, go ahead.
But at the start, you talked about like ways to detect insider threats through different types of technologies. A lot of institutions don't implement this because of privacy concerns. Do you have any comments on balancing privacy of your staff and users and students with, trying to detect these insider threats?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with cybersecurity in general, is always sort of a balance between having a very, very secure system and having a usable system. And where that sort of falls really is up to organization and organizational leadership. In terms of privacy, yeah, I don't necessarily have a good answer, because the answer is almost always it depends. It depends on what the information is and the applicable laws there. typically organizations in their privacy policies spell out how they'll use, process, and store the data. And so as long as it's clear and the users are clear when they're using the system, the organization, as long as they're following said policies and procedures, there shouldn't be an issue. If you step outside of those bounds where it's not well defined, I think that's where you'll end up in trouble, specifically from a privacy perspective. And so it is interesting too, because the nature of how some privacy policies are written, especially if you get into GDPR and even Quebec law 25, certain jurisdictions laws now apply to their citizens even when they're outside of that jurisdiction. So it's just important to know clearly what your organization is doing and you know what the laws are.
Thank you, Ben and Pat, for that informative session. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Everyone seems to be like cybersecurity superstars. It's amazing. So we appreciate your interest and continued enthusiasm for securing our digital environment. And we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to contact us by email at nsc-cybersecurity-training-awareness@gw.alliancecan.ca. We also have a next session on Zero Trust in HPC on October 24th, and looking forward to having you join us then too. And we've got lots more sessions before the end of the month, and all those sessions are available on our website and the link that's in our slides here. So with that said, thanks so much, everyone.